Thanks for coming, everyone. This session is called Practical Deployment Techniques for Small Labs. I'm Anthony Reimer. I come, as you'll find out, I was one of those people up in the map up in Western Canada part. So I want to tell you what I'm going to try to give to you today, or offer, maybe is a better word. I want to focus on things that anyone can use. If you've read my bio, you know that I have 3 degrees. 2 of them are in music, 1 of them is in education. I have a minor in computer science on my undergrad music degree, right? And that's where I kind of got the bug. And I've worked with Macs for over 20 years now. I bought my first Mac in '91. And so I want to give you, if you don't have the background, I want to give you stuff, you're uncomfortable with certain things, techniques that anyone can use. And some of you can do more than I can. And I'm totally OK with that. But I want to focus on that. I'm going to tell you about things like package-based image making and stuff like that. You know what? If you don't follow that religion, that's fine. There should still be some things in there that you can take with you, that you can use. Leave the rest. That's fine with me. And I'm going to point you to places to get more information, including other sessions at this conference. And that's a bit about what that booklet is about as well, right? It's got extra resources, all the links, they're actually in that little book. And that's why I've kind of called it a handbook rather than a handout. I'll put the link back up at the end if you missed it, and I'll leave that up. So I'm going to divide this talk into 4 areas. Packaging, image creation, deployment, and then user management. Now, I'm going to ask you various times where you guys are at with that, just like who does this, who does that, just to give a better idea, because I'd like to know who I'm talking to and how I can better tailor the presentation here. I don't have a written script that I'm reading, so that I can add little bits that are more applicable to you. If you do have questions, probably the best time is right at the end of each section. So if you have a question about packaging, where I'll tell you, well, there's more sessions on packaging here. Do you have any questions? Those are probably the really good times to ask it. One of the reasons I wanted to do this session is at my own institution, when we ask this question, like, OK, what are you using for packaging? What's packaging? Next question, what are you using for image creation? Well, I'm building a golden master Mac. I'm using carbon copy cloner. And I'm just creating it. And then I probably have, well, how am I deploying it? Oh, I probably have a USB hard drive, and I'm just pushing it back out. Right? And then, well, how am I securing things? Well, if I'm using the golden machine method, it's probably just parental controls already baked in. Or maybe I'm just, I don't know. I'm not doing much. I'm just making the guest account so they can go nuts. But as soon as they log out, everything goes away. Right? And you can, as I think, was it 10.6 you could do that with the guest account, maybe even 10.5? So that's what they're doing. So what I'm here to do today is tell you other options than these that use some of the best practices, but as I was just in Alistair Banks's first part of his session, last session, he talked about it saying using better practices. We're not going to get to best, especially in a small lab situation like I have. So there we go. So commercial. Again, I need to thank my employer, University of Calgary. It's not quite that green there yet. Trees are just starting to bud. Just to the left of where this picture is taken is where my labs are. As you'll find out why in a second, we're on top of our parkade, along with, well, I'll tell you in a sec. We've got a 20-seat lab, a 10-seat lab. I'm shooting diagonally across the corners of the lab so you get a sense of space of them. We service art, music, drama, and dance students. So we're in the art building. So they built a 5-story parkade and then said, oh, where do we want to put the art students? Oh, let's just slap them on top of the on top of the parkade. Good ventilation, and no one else wants to be there. So we moved in there, but we only moved in there a few years ago. So that's going to be that's been very helpful because we have modern networking in there now. But it also does mean, because I'm servicing these clients, we're dealing with audio, video, even drafting for the drama students, interactive stuff, where you're capturing stuff, sometimes through MIDI, sometimes through sensors. We're forming part of kind of the dark room, if you will, like we're doing large photographic prints, and of course people are using Photoshop and Illustrator for editing. So because of those apps, we need local storage. We can't just store in the cloud. Just doesn't work. And in fact, some of the music apps will literally not work properly if you're not using local storage. So that's one of the limitations of how I have to work, and that's informed some of my decisions. We've got a mixed lab of stuff. We've got Mac Minis, Mac Pros. There's even an old 4-year-old white iMac. But they all have matte displays, either old cinema displays or 24-inch art-grade matte displays, because that's what we need for calibration. And like I said, since we moved in there in 2006, we got Cat 6. And that's really going to help when we come to the deployment part. I am blessed. As a 20-odd-year Mac user, I do not have to dual boot into Windows. I don't do Windows. It's in my job description. I support Macs. That also makes some of the things I talk about simpler. You may have to add a little level, but most of the stuff you can still use. I've got it to the point now where I've got a single master image so that we deploy to all 30 plus of those stations. Having said that, I have 110 gigabyte payload when I deploy an image. Compresses down to 77. But that's because like the video apps, especially the music apps with all the music samples, it's just huge. So this is one of the reasons why some of these techniques help me move faster or more effectively. And then there are still a few machines, like we have slide scanners, flatbed scanners, that we need extra software for. The MIDI keyboards that we have at every station don't require an extra software, but I still have to do some stuff ad hoc after the fact. Because I've been able to keep it to a single image and everyone's doing the same stuff, I have 2 local accounts, an admin account and a user account. Users do not have to authenticate in my lab. And part of the reason is because the lab is actually controlled by a swipe card or a proximity card. So we can control physical access to the room. So how nasty they're being to the machines is a little less of an issue. So that, and because of the storage thing I mentioned earlier, that's why we can have a single restricted user account. And so I just take a standard user and restrict it using local MCX. And I'll talk about that in the 4th segment, right? I have the benefit of having a file server where people will basically put copies of their stuff up, or some of the small stuff, like there's music ear training stuff, where there's a student file, that can run off the server, no problem. We also have, as I'll tell you later, we manage some of our software through there. And the one thing, when I started learning about this stuff, was when I went to the 2008 Macworld, what's now called the Mac IT part of their conference. I heard in more than one session, get a test machine, get a test machine. I was just taking a machine out of service for a bit and working with it. Get a test machine. Okay? It's well worth the investment, especially a Mac Mini. Mac Mini server is great. I've got a 2009 Mac Mini server, and recently just bought Lion to test. And I divide it up. I have a Lion server, Lion client, and even a partition so that I can test out the images I build using some of the tools I'm going to show. All right. We also, as the lab, offer photographic printing services. We loan out audio recorders, video recorders, drawing tablets. And we have 900 users who have card access, probably I would say about 100 active users. Now, you've seen the whole picture of, I've kind of described in 10 minutes my frame of reference, right? I'm the staff member. I also, by the way, I'm the chief bottle washer. I do all the ordering. I do, I liaise with profs, all that kind of stuff. During our fall and winter terms, which are 2 4-month terms, I have a student generally on duty with me at the time, so they can deal with some of the more mundane things. But as you see, if I set this up right, I can also have them do some of the stuff like I have them do deployment because of the way we've got it set up. And that can be really beneficial. So if you walked into my lab, you'd see this on the desktop. And if people need to file share between stations, I've set up a simple little Apple script that because I have the same users on each station, I don't have to say, okay, you go connect, find the station, authenticate with fine arts user, and oh yes, the password is FAU. I don't have to do that. That's baked right into the Apple script. And it's something very simple. If you want, I'm happy to share the Apple scripts if it's something that applies to you. But it's very simple. And like I said, no authentication. They just sit down and do it. So packaging, image creation, deployment, user management. How many of you are packaging right now? OK, this is good. I like this. You have come to the right place. So let me just define packaging for you. You've probably seen packages before, but basically packages are just a collection of files somewhere on the hard drive. It can be an app, it can be a folder worth of stuff, it can be stuff scattered all over, that you can then bundle up into a nice little package and run as an installer. In fact, that's how Apple's installer works, right? But it has additional benefits. How many of you are using Apple Remote Desktop? You know, you can take a package that you create and install it silently, right? So this is a real benefit of packaging. If you're trying to figure out how can I get this on every single station, or even get this, okay, I've set this up, and now the next time this happens, I want to be able to do it again the same way, you can put almost any file in, and it works. There's certain settings you can't make, like, for example, the time zone that you're in that you can't bake in that don't work, but almost anything can go in. And by me doing packaging, I've learned, or I can learn or deduce, that app, where is it putting its preferences, or where is it putting the serial number? Where, I can use packaging tools to ferret that information out. So here's some tools that you might want to have in your toolkit. I use Composer. I do not, for those of you who know about the Casper suite, I do not use the full suite. I just use Composer. $80 educational. For me, the user interface and some of the additions that come in, like package manifests, are worth the $80. Having said that, Package Maker, made by Apple, can do some very good things. It's free. You just have to, I believe that's the one you have to sign up for a developer account for. Yes, you just have to sign up for a free developer account, not the $99 one, the free one. And I mentioned Amy for a reason. I presume some of you in here package Adobe products, or you have Adobe products. I have not successfully been able to use Amy. And so when the product manager for Adobe tweeted last week saying that it'll be out a week after Creative Suite is available, so by the end of this month, and it's much better. He also mentioned in his blog post that it's going to be required that you use it if you want to package. Repackaging won't work, and they've been working with Jamf software to basically, Jamf is even going to recommend, according to Mr. Rogers, that you use Adobe's process. Well, I hope it works. Having said that, that's what they're being very forthcoming in saying, we want to make sure this does work. Okay, so at this point, repackaging Adobe CS 6 will work with 3. It won't necessarily work with other stuff before it. Okay, it's just for repackaging that. The Composer has what they now call a package manifest. If you used an earlier version, they called it a diff file. They have a package manifest for CS5 if you want to use it. Did you have a question?
Just really quickly, Amy, is that Mac?
It is Adobe Application Management for Enterprise Edition, I believe it is. That's why. Yeah, it's definitely Enterprise Edition, Management, and Adobe. I think the 5th one is Application. Here's some things I like to have on the machine that I'm doing the packaging on, and on my machine as well. Suspicious package. You can examine the contents of any package through a Quick Look plugin. You're familiar with Quick Look? Hit the space bar? Well, normally it'll just say, this is a package. You can actually look inside of it, and there's a button that says Show Contents. You can see all of it, right? So it's a good way, again, to ferret out on a commercial package what's going where, or even one that you build your own. I've found that if I combine between, there's a tool that is out there called Pacifist, where you can break apart the package. I've found that with Suspicious Package and Composer, which can also take a package and build it, say, OK, here are the component parts. I don't need Pacifist. A good text editor is always useful. Text Wrangler is free. BBEdit, $50 at the App Store, or on Bare Bones' site is probably the premier text editor. But like I said, Text Wrangler, try it, or another text editor for plain text, because those are good for editing plist files and some other things we'll talk about later, and Apple Remote Desktop, and most of you already have that, so I don't have to sell you that. But if you know people who don't use it, it's only $80 at the App Store now, right? Tell them, go get it. OK, so how do we make a package? OK, there are a few methodologies. First is, and it's the historic one, snapshot, where the software will take a whole string, will take basically a snapshot of the whole directory structure, when stuff was modified, where the files are. Then you go ahead and install stuff. There can even be a reboot in between, right? And then you come back to the software that you did the snapshot and say, OK, now I'm done. Take the after picture and make a differential. OK, and then it will give you all the files that got modified or modified and changed, depending on what you choose, in that period. And that's quite reliable. You get a lot of stuff that you have to edit out, but it gives you everything. Like most recent application run from the Finder, right? Recent items, that plist will get updated. Well, you'll throw that away when you build a package. Monitor system events doesn't require that uptime, because it can take a while to scan a hard drive. This is a method that Apple's package maker uses, and Composer can use as well, where it just tracks what FS events under the hood sends, and most of the time that's just as accurate. If you have a little problem, I would do the full snapshot, but I use the system events method all the time. Package manifests I touched on. Jamf is very good in Composer to give you a list of things that if you have this software installed, you can say, oh, Office 2011. Oh, they have something for that. Let me just do that, and it will take all the files that you need for a good Office install for volume licensing and take it off the hard drive you're on and put it in and say, OK, that's ready to package. And you can still edit. But those are useful, and people can contribute those as well, or you can build, I believe you can build your own. And simple drag and drop. Apple's Package Manager can do this as well, where you take a file from the Finder and literally drag it on the sidebar. And then it'll remember the path in most cases. Sometimes and you can go and change the path if you like. So here's an example of the Composer UI. So this is a drag and drop package where I just took that folder of scripts you saw. I just dragged it onto the sidebar over here. And it went and said, OK, and said, OK, here's the path. Users, shared, connect. And oh, when I've got something highlighted, here are all the permissions. So I can make sure I do that right. And if I want to, I can get rid of stuff if I like. Or add to it. I can drag more stuff in. Yeah, it is. Yeah, 852. Yeah. Here's an example of one I used by monitoring system events. Right? This is where I had a copy protection dongle. And man, the software, I eventually found out there was a PowerPC software, like not even universal. That's why it wasn't working in line. It was just literally PowerPC. But I installed this. I said, I need to repackage this because I can't run a PowerPC installer. So I repackaged it. And you'll notice there's stuff in here. Well, I have a tech account. That's my admin account. com.apple.finder.plist. The Finder preferences changed. Well, I don't want that in the package. So I simply delete that and then before I build my package. And then we're done. There's a Build as Package button at the top. Boom, you're done. One thing that does point out is, I'll jump to the second point right now. Because of the methodology I use, I like to keep anything that's going to go in a user account in a separate package from what's going in at the system level. And that there's a lot of reasons that that makes sense. So even if you get a package manifest and it has that, I tend to extract that out and maybe put it back. But there's a couple potential pitfalls there. You'll capture whole p-lists sometimes. And sometimes you only want one or two of the settings within that. Right? So that's where you grab the text editor, strip them out, and maybe push them out. But the package will overwrite those. So it's a case of if you're doing it on an active system, you're doing it to send out a patch, you want to fix something, it's going to overwrite. So sometimes that's not even advisable. So it's worth going through and checking those type of things for that. But because I have those 2 user accounts, in the workflow I'm going to show you in a bit using InstaDMG, if I include that into the actual master installer, if you like, the thing that creates the image, if I put things in a user account that doesn't exist yet, when the OS goes to create that user, it'll say, oh, I see the library folder is already created. I'm not going to create any other folders after that. So you get, it took me the longest time to figure this out, which is why I'm telling you. If you ever get into a situation where you use some of these tools and the user folder doesn't populate with all the default folders, that's probably the reason. You've run some sort of installer before the first login that puts something in a place that will exist, but hasn't existed yet. And when it goes to create it, it just says, oh, bang, done. Everything else must be there. I like having my test machine using the same users and permissions, just those 2 users. And as I'll show you, you can build one fairly quickly this way. And companies provide packages. Use them when you can. They won't always work in all the workflows. How many of you have had tried to install a package using Apple Remote Desktop from just a full app? Any generally successful? Always successful?
Sometimes not successful.
Sometimes not successful. Those are the same type of problems you'll have in some of the stuff I'll have before. And sometimes you can hack the package. Sometimes the only solution, however, is to repack, where you just install it and pack it again. Sad but true. I mentioned earlier, sometimes we want to capture how the app serializes. So here's what I do. I've got these 3 apps. Any of you use any of these apps? I bet you probably use maybe one of them. We got Fetch, iStop Motion, yep. And this one no one will have ever used, Notability Pro. It was a music notation program that first started on the Next platform. So it was literally the first music notation program on OS X because that ran natively. All of these things have one thing in common. They have a way to serialize stuff that's put in a particular spot, usually in the app itself. Or in the case of iStop Motion, they want you to just copy out a whole, it's like, okay, copy and paste this email message contents into the serial number dialog box. I don't want to do that every time. And these guys are nice enough to either give you drag installers or package installers. So we can use the normal tools we use, right? So what I did was I got Fire Up Composer. Actually, in fact, Fire Up Composer. Well, OK, sorry, step back. I drag install or install the app. I fire up Composer. Or Package Maker, if you like. It'll do the same thing. Say, monitor system events. I fire up the app, put in the authorization, hit OK, go back to my packaging tool, like I said, Package Maker Composer, say, I'm done, build the package. And it will find what the differences are. And so I found out, for example, in the case of Notability Pro, it was literally a single file put in the app bundle, right in the app. And if I copied that one file, I wouldn't have to type in the serial number every time I push out an update, which is pretty important because when he gets on a roll, he throws out bug patches all the time. And I say he because he's a professor at the University of British Columbia, and it's basically his tool. So he does that as part of his research. So it's a little washed out on the screen here. But what I do is when he says, OK, I've got a new package, all I do is I fire up Apple Remote Desktop. I throw in the new package. And then I take the package that I built, Notability Pro Authorization, and put it in right after and say, OK, push it out to every machine in the lab. Done, right? Those serialization things, or even like in an iStop motion where I have to actually drag install, I could still use a copy file and then afterwards send out a package and say, and here's the authorization. Because that's something that's not going on every machine. We don't have a full lab license, so I need to push it out this way. So that's just kind of something I've learned about. If you want to know more about packaging, if you were at Brett Gross's first session this morning, he touched a little bit about it. The session Thursday at 1:30 is kind of more like, it seems like he's going to talk about some of the same things I did, but from the Windows side coming to Mac. Looks like most of you have Apple Remote Desktop things. And if you really want to get geeky with packaging, luggage is kind of a command line way to do it. But so there's a session on that Friday morning as well. If this link should be in the handout, but everything from the past two conferences, or almost everything, is up. Both the slides are up, and videos of the session linked from that page. And so, like Rusty Myers did something in Intro to Packaging last year, a whole session that might be interesting to you. And there are some other resources. Okay, anyone have questions about packaging? Good. Okay, so yeah.
The two tools that you mentioned, what are the price tags on those?
Package Maker. It actually is in the handout. Package Maker, Apple, free with a free developer account. Composer, Jamf software. You can talk to them in the booth. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because they're here. I'm doing it because that's the tool I use and I like it. $80 educational, and like I bought it in version 7. I paid for it once, and it's more than paid for itself, quite frankly. Image creation. Another question?
I had a question. Do you package stuff for like the user template to create other accounts, or do you kind of just have those two accounts in those machines?
Okay, so do I package stuff for the user template? For Microsoft Office, the answer is yes. However, one of the reasons I'm coming to this conference is to learn better practices. I'm learning that pushing stuff into the default user template, like up at the system level, not a good idea. And I'm learning some different techniques this week, and I think I'm going to start applying those. Do I install? Sorry, I've already.
No, it was just
Yeah. I do sometimes do stuff after the fact, like after this machine's been cloned, and I'll talk about it again, customizing. I will sometimes send out a package that does actually go into even that user account and say, OK, if I've got no other way to fix it, that's the way I do it. So how many of you are still using the golden machine method, as I call it, of mastering, where you throw everything on a machine and then you just clone it off? How many are using that? OK. How many of you are using system image utility, maybe? OK. Anyone using InstaDMG, InstaImage, whatever you like to call it? Any of you using a commercial product like Casper? OK. Great. That's good. So I'm going to describe what I call image creation 1.0 versus 2.0. So image creation 1.0 is the golden machine method, where you throw everything on, then you capture a master image. And you know, in the old days, when we were just starting, like in just early OS 10, it was like get a FireWire drive, literally finder copy the files. And I did that. Disk utility, that still comes in occasionally for me. I had a situation where I took my Mac Pros, and because I was upgrading hard drives, I took the old hard drives and RAIDed them in half of the Mac Pros. Well, some of the deployment tools don't work very well with RAIDed drives. They just don't. So I actually had to resort to using disk utility to copy my master over. Carbon Copy Cloner, that was the go-to tool. That was certainly my second tool. There are still people on my campus that use it. And DeployStudio. And that's the tool I use now for deployment, and as I'll tell you I'll tell you another use I have for it just at the end. And those last tools have the benefit of knowing to strip stuff out that's going to be problematic, or at least deploy stuff out that's going to be problematic when you push it to a machine. So what I call image creation 2.0 is where you build your image from scratch one of two ways. You either take an OS And for example, the net install method from Apple, where you basically throw everything in and it just installs it just like an OS installer with a lot more packages, right? It's still a package-based method. The method that I do is one where we build an image by installing it never on a machine, but directly into a disk image. So we just get our OS, all our system updates, and our software packages. We throw them in, use a tool that just writes it directly to a disk image, and that potentially is what we would deploy. So, mentioned system image utility. It can create netboot images, net install images, and net restore, where net restore simply takes the whole thing and just throws it at it. InstaImage with the Insta UpToDate add-on, that uses that second method I described, where you create the image by installing on a disk image, never on a machine. And then there are commercial tools we talked about, Casper and other things like that, that can do this type of thing. So what are the advantages of doing 2.0 type imaging? Over the old method, you've never booted the image. So there's no underlying cruft. Here's a situation I had. I had a music app on an old image that I had been doing the 1.0 way, and it was failing on certain aspects. And you know what? You know how I fixed it, or how I could fix it? By deleting the prefs for Adobe Photoshop? Like, these two things should have nothing to do with each other. This was one of the things saying, I guess I need to build a new master from scratch, right? Those things in this type of methodology, I won't say they don't happen, but they happen much less frequently because you're not just recycling the same image, and over time stuff gets left in there, or you don't even know it's there. One of the advantages is you can swap stuff in and out. I mentioned OSs here, but you can swap versions out. Just take that package out, put it in, rebuild. Very beneficial. And you'll know we've had a couple problems with certain updates if you applied them in advance, or you applied them to your golden master. Like, for example, Office Service Pack 2, the 0.0 version. If that was your master, and you have nothing to go back to, it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to uninstall it and reinstall it. With a package-based methodology, you could just say, oh man, that was bad. Let's take the 2.0 package out and put the 1.4 version back. Right? So it has a good advantage there. Although thankfully, we don't have to use that advantage too much. So let's just review this. So we've got the operating system, the software updates that come with the operating system or anything that's installed with the OS, and then a bunch of packages. We then collect them in some way, shape, or form. I've just used folders here. But we collect them, and then we use an image utility of some sort to create a bouncing baby disk image. So here's how it works, the tool I use, which is InstaImage, and you'll hear it called InstaDMG, InstaDimage. I have trouble pronouncing InstaDimage. And so these are all the same. I'm just going to call it InstaImage, and you can translate as necessary. So InstaImage is it's just a simple script that you run via the command line, and it does all the collection for you. Having said that, I used it originally without Insta UpToDate, and you used to have to put every package in a single numbered folder so that it knew which order it was. So you put, okay, this one is 001, and you put that package in. Okay, this one should come next, 002, and put a single package in there. This is, not only is swapping OSs fairly easy in this type of workflow, but with like the Insta UpToDate add-on, we can auto-collect system updates. That was always a pain in using before. We can have it go and fetch what are the latest operating system updates. And instead of having to create all those number folders, we can have it do that for us. Right? So anyone who's going to start using InstaImage, I recommend jumping straight to this because it's a lot less hassle. If you want to try it with the unmarked folder, with the marked folders and stuff, that's fine. But I would suggest if you have anything that's less trivial, go right to that. So it consists of these parts: a shell script that you just run using the terminal, the create user package. And again, this is one of those things, if you do nothing else, if you take nothing else from this, go grab the create user package. It's useful. You go in, you just modify a text file. In the Lion version, it's an XML file. Hash a password. And you can literally set up, in my situation, I could set up a third account by simply sending this package out. And quite frankly, I did. Because we all of a sudden had a class that needed permission to run executables they created. It was actually a game programming course. And so I took that user package, said, OK, that user password, OK, and push it out. And now, upon login, all those machines now have that account. Right? And especially because it was a standard account, it was easy. InstaUpToDate is just, again, a script, a Python script. And it does checksumming as well, so that it knows that the packages have integrity. And then catalog files. And catalog files are the key to making some of the things automate very well. So this is what the file structure looks like in InstaImage. You've got a bunch in the root level, and in the installers, you simply just have a base OS folder, a base updates folder, and a custom package folder. The last two are added by InstaUpToDate, but when the InstaImage runs, it's just going to use the contents of those three folders. Some of them will have links out to other stuff. And you can get, as you see in the handout, you can get InstaImage by simply typing a simple thing into the command line. You don't have to go to a website. And the reason I suggest you learn how to do that is because that's also how you can update it. You just type in this one single thing in the command line, and you can keep it updated with the latest version. OK? And here's up in the add-ons folder, that's where InstaUpToDate lives. Excuse me. And it provides, see on the list on the side there, it provides those catalogs. The people who support InstaUpToDate keep changing those catalogs so that when you check out the latest version of InstaImage, it will provide all those as well. And so when I said it can auto-update, well, vanilla catalog for 10.7 has, it says, OK, here's the disk image. Here's where the 10.7.3 updater is. And here are all the other ones, the Java update, et cetera, et cetera. And because this is open source and people, yeah, did I say it was free? It's free. Because this is open source, individuals are maintaining these. So if you need to push out a patch quickly and they haven't updated that catalog, it's just a text file. You can download what you need and change the text file. OK? You're totally under your control. But for the most part, this makes it simple for routine stuff, and you don't have to manage it yourself. You'll also notice there's some packages or some catalogs for like iLife, 09, 11, those type of things. Those can come in very handy. Here is what it looks like, the catalog files. All you do is control it by, like for example, it says here's the 10.7 vanilla catalog. It says here's OS 10 Lion 10.7.3, Safari 5.1.5, tells where you get it from. Most of the time, this is going to be an address on your computer, a path in the custom packages, InstaUpToDate custom packages folder. But you can also fetch them from the internet, and it'll cache it locally. So that's what they've done here for the catalog. That's what makes it work so well. And then they do checksum all the files, so that if Apple does release, there's a problem with one, it will find out and say, no, this is not, or this package has been modified, it doesn't match, I'm not going to install it. Yeah?
Is it like Make, where you have to have a tab as the first line below? And you've got like a tag, it looks like a Make file, where you've got like a label, colon, something, and then some rules beneath it.
Yeah, the reason you saw the wavy lines, because yes, they're tab separated.
Okay.
So it's just like, item, tab, tab. But the good news is I didn't have to type those in. The checksumming command line utility did it for me. And I literally so you just say checksum this package. If it's one of my packages, I just drop it in. It says, OK, I checksummed it, and here's your line, literally copy and paste it into the catalog. So I don't even have to worry about formatting that way. It does provide templates. As I mentioned, it includes, I've already covered all that. So let's just go on. You notice how there are multiple catalog files there? Big benefit. You can include other catalogs inside things. So for example, I had to rebuild the machine that my student technicians work on. And we're still using Snow Leopard in the lab. So I just said, OK, let's include 10.6 vanilla. Let's put in the tech account and add text wrangler. They'll need Office. Oh, and this one, I don't normally install iLife because I don't have a license for every station, but they should have it, so I'll just copy those lines in. Oh, and because I know there's a catalog file for iLife 11 updates, I'll have it run that right after I install that. That's it. And then I just tell it to, in fact, the steps, there's a step-by-step in your handbook about what steps you follow. But once you've built this, I can build this. And I just say, OK, inst up to date, populate those 3 folders that InstaImage needs. OK, now make the image. Make it so. And that's what happens. And that is one of the really strong flexibility things with this. You can do this quite easily, and you can have multiple images. So I needed a core image for testing. Well, I just built a new catalog to say include that, run it, done. Right? I still have to wait a while for the image, but it's taking less of my time. And I can make as many different types of images as I want by just maintaining text files. So for me, that's a big win. Having said that, as I mentioned, sometimes you just got to ship, right? I have a 110 gig payload. And while was successful doing the version of Final Cut Pro prior to prior to 7, I was able to get that packaged properly using Apple packages. And Creative Suite, I've never been able to properly package that. Sometimes you just can't say, OK, I can't spend all my life packaging. I just got to get this ready for my lab, right? So I have to be honest. I believe in image creation 2.0, but I use image creation 1.5, right? Where I go as far as I can with packaging, because I know that's going to give me the cleanest baseline possible. I then take that image that I generate. I use InstaImage. And I then install it on a driver or machine, manually install everything else I need, do whatever tweaks I couldn't do myself, and then I use this DeployStudio to take the image, because I know then it will take out any of the unnecessary stuff that that we don't need for deployment purposes. So that's right now how I create my image. I am definitely working towards doing full 2.0, but the whole point of this session was to say, take what you like, take little bits. I did this over a period of years. Okay, I went to Macworld in 2008. I started building up bit by bit. For me, my tech time is during the summer. I run full out. My university goes from 32,000 students to about 8,000 during the 4 months of spring and summer, just because of the way we structure our academic year. I have more time to do stuff like that during the summer. It's whatever gets done, gets done. Okay? If you don't use DeployStudio, I'll talk about that more next, but there's a whole 60-minute lab on that. Unfortunately, the only other session on InstaImage specifically is running against this one. But the one, again, with our Windows, coming from Windows, he will talk about InstaImage in his session tomorrow at 1:30. So that's what's up with that. You can still catch Alistair Banks's information on from his InstaImage session from last year, and it's quite complete in that way. And there's some other sessions on that resources from previous years you might be interested in. Anyone have questions on imaging 2.0 or 1.5 or? Yeah.
Just have a question on how you created that user on the fly for the gaming. You created that user after you already had your local users.
Yep.
And you didn't put that in the default user template. How did the new user get set up right?
The answer is that create user package that comes with, that you download with InstaImage as one of the add-ons, they have done all the dirty work for you, and that all you have to do is install it. And then I believe it's after reboot, when you go to a login screen, there will now be a third user account. In my situation, there will be another user account.
But it won't pick up the preferences from the English.L project, the template.
Oh no, it'll in this case for my situation, I just wanted a standard account. I didn't heavily need to lock them down because they were only 20 people had the password, right? So I took that as a managed risk, right? But that just created the user. You could later, using the stuff I'm going to talk about in the fourth segment, you could then push out managed preferences on that account if that's what you needed. In my case, I didn't need it. But
maybe you do a way that you could, instead of using the template, say use your local user as the template.
That's interesting. Not in that way. After I've gone over the other two segments, ask me again if there's something else that comes to mind, because it might. Okay, how many we're now into the deployment section, section 3. How many of you are deploying using, we'll call it, good old hard drive file copy? On occasion. How many of you using, even if you're using a hard drive, whether you're using hard drive or network, how many of you using DeployStudio right now? Great, about half of you, maybe a little more. Any of you using Apple's Net Restore? Okay. Well, I mean, we're at PSU. Any of you using like PSU Blast as part of their stuff? Okay. Anyone using like just Carbon Copy Cloner to just copy over? Okay. How many of you are copying stuff off of a server? Like your image lives on a server and you're deploying via a server? Okay. Okay, that's pretty good actually. I break down deploying images into 2 segments, and this is how I describe it to my student technicians, because since I have them do this work, I need to conceptualize it in a way. And sometimes part 1 has already been done. I will say do part 2. And I break it down into cloning and customizing, where cloning is just taking that monolithic master image and pushing it out. And customizing is adding all the things that make it unique, like what's its AFP sharing name? What's the IP address? On my machines, how many of you deal with copy protected software? Right? That means, and sometimes that means touching the machine to do that, right? That's customizing in my mind, right? Doing it to that machine. And afterwards, if we have, because I control stuff locally for managed clients, as I'll talk about in the fourth segment, we apply those as part of the customization thing as well. So I also break cloning down into 3 parts. The booting, how do you boot the Mac? How do you serve the image, which is why I asked that question earlier, and how do you copy the image? Because sometimes they're the same, but sometimes they're different. So what are the ways you can boot a Mac for deployment? Okay, from a hard drive? From a DVD? Yep, from a DVD, absolutely. Network. Those are the 3 big ones, right? So an image of, a system image of some sort. I picture FireWire drive could anything, or in our environment, generally Netboot. There are third-party alternatives, but just some kind of boot over the network. We can then serve that same image, right? Or we can serve the image we want to put out on a hard drive, no matter which way we boot, right? We can economize and put the hard drive on the same thing as our external boot system. We can also do it we can also store it on a server, or in Apple's Net Restore methodology, essentially it becomes all one big, it's not really one big package, but I want to say that if you're doing Net Restore, this and the next part, serving and copying the image, it's all kind of one thing, and so from the end user's point, it's seemingly the same. You just boot it up and just say engage, and it just goes whoop, right? So I mentioned copying the image, disk utility, sometimes we still need it. DeployStudio is a very good way to copy the image. Talked about Net Restore, and you can do it through terminal. And there's a little tip on there. I actually now I've just started doing this recently. I now use terminal to copy from my InstaImage that I created to a test partition on the same thing, because I can tell it not to verify. I can just, essentially have the time because it doesn't have to verify. right? And because I know it's always going to the same partition, I can make it a very short command. And so it's very quick that way. And then customizing. I don't want to do as much of the first one as possible. I want to minimize the first one, where I touch it, right? DeployStudio does some really nice things, especially for those things like talked about, like IP address, the name. Yeah.
Do you actually use static IP?
I do. I have that luxury.
Why? And are you saying luxury sarcastically?
No, I'm not. It's because IP addresses are now hard to come by. And we've been allotted certain ones, but there are certain management tasks that I can do with fixed IP that are, well, I wouldn't say they're more reliable, but for example, that Apple script to connect to each station, it's dead simple by me saying, okay, I know station 1 is 136.159.206.131, the next one's 132, and I can just, Apple script is smart enough to do math, and I can just do it that way. So that made my life easier. And since we've got the static IPs, I'm not going to change it. It does mean I have to, as part of one of my packages, is a firewall package, right? It does mean I have to be very good with my firewalls because now, if you know the IP address, you can get to it. But no, for me, for running a single-person ship, I'm perfectly okay knowing that this machine is always going to be .134. I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards and you tell me why that you like to,
Well, you're also not working in a directory services
Correct.
environment. So
Absolutely.
it's a completely different boat.
Absolutely. We actually use Apple Remote Desktop to push out our managed client, our MCX settings at the end. It's just the easiest way to do it, but that could be a way to install additional software that goes on just that station and those customized things that I talked about before, like the authorization. And you can still do stuff using terminal or even Unix, send a Unix command over DeployStudio. And scripting. I guess the terminal also stands for scripting. I am not good at shell scripting. I don't do any post-deploy scripts yet, but that's something that's kind of the next thing on my wish to learn. That's why I went to one session like that this morning. This is what I do most of the time. I boot from a Netboot server created by DeployStudio. I serve that off of my server, which is actually my test machine, believe it or not. That Mac Mini is what serves it. I just happen to have a FireWire 800 RAID attached to it, just a 2-driver, nothing fancy. I do DeployStudio for both the deployment and to get those usernames on. We still have to touch the machines. It's just the way it is. But Apple Remote Desktop can help with some of the stuff near the end. Occasionally, I mentioned the kind of the exceptions, and we have a kind of a recalcitrant machine where I have to boot it from like a USB stick, but it can still see the network. So I still do that. I have gigabit. This is why I can do this. You may find that it's easier to get a FireWire 800 hard drive or even now a Thunderbolt hard drive and do it one by one if your lab is small enough. For me, this saved a lot of time. Quickly, most of you use DeployStudio, but for those who don't, just know that it is able to capture a golden master image if that's what you want to do. It creates its own Netboot images, including on an external hard drive. So it can even strip something down. So it's not technically a Netboot software, but it can give you a core OS that then acts as a DeployStudio server that's literally just a hard drive. So if you're using if we'll call it the disk utility method of copying, investigate this. Because you can automate, you can then take advantage of some of those post-processing things and adding packages. For example, DeployStudio, you can tell it to, and install this package afterwards. And again, I mentioned how I used it for post-cloning processing. So I have found that the fastest for me is netbooting and using DeployStudio over my gigabit Ethernet network. That 110 gig payload compressed down to 77, I can reliably do it in 45 minutes if I'm doing one machine, even 2 or 3 machines. Now, I have never been able to get multicast to work. So how many of you use this method if you're doing netbooting? On your mark, get set, go. Hit enter, so you get everything set up. For those of you, anyone who not know if you don't know what I'm talking about, I learned actually back in, I think it was 10.4, an Apple trainer had come into our lab and was giving a session, and this is how we cloned our lab back. If you get things going at the same time in a non-multicast environment, if you get them all going about the same time, you'll hit the cache, the cache on the server instead of actually going to the drive. And so if they're all hitting the cache, then the chances of you going at about the same speed as if, let's say, only 1 or 2 machines were going is much increased. In fact, your load time is much quicker. Having said that, if you do bang, 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 and then wait 30 seconds to go bang, this one can slow down the whole batch, right? It's the reality of it. So you may pick a number that is suitable, when you're getting to whether that'll work. I'm gonna, again, one of the things I want to try multicast, but it's kind of difficult. I'm actually thinking my supervisor has a Mac lab of 24 iMacs, and he asked me, because we just had a faculty amalgamation, and so now I report to him, he asked me to image his 24 iMac lab, right? He has 100 megabit, and the server is like 4 floors away, and I have no idea how many hops it is in between. He had like a 10 gig image, and it was taken 3 hours. So if he asks me to do it again this summer, and he will, I'm gonna try to convince him to buy a cheap 8-port gigabit switch, get the cables, and literally take my test server, hook it up, boom, 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 use DeployStudio. I swear it's going to be faster. I'm here seeing nods at saying, yes, that's exactly the case. I still do have a FireWire 800 drive, just actually for his. Some of the I tried that out. Some of them were easily beating. I was doing like 1 or 2 or 3 machines while the other 8 that were going off the server were still running. So that's a good backup, yeah.
I just want to point you the DeployStudio documentation that someone wrote up. I don't know if you checked it out. It's like a 100-page document. They actually have a section where they kind of tell you some tips that you can use for like getting multicasting working. I haven't gotten it working in my environment because I have 100 megabit connection. Yeah. So.
That's good to know. Yeah, the documentation for DeployStudio is much better, and thanks for pointing me to that, because I have a benefit that in Brent Gross's session we were talking about this morning. I can actually pull the network cable. I have access to the room with the switches. And so I can take us offline. In fact, it's one of the reasons if we wanted to, we could be an Apple authorized training center, because we can actually go off the grid by pulling just a single cable. So more sessions on deployment. Like I said, for those of you who haven't used DeployStudio, I think it's well worth your while. I did have trouble getting DeployStudio up and running initially. It was a bit of a learning curve for me, but once I got it up and running, it's great. For some of the post-config stuff, Blast or BIC is something I want to investigate. I will probably attend that session myself. And there have already been a couple sessions already at the conference about these type of topics. If you want to know more about netbooting, that's from 2011, and they talk about DeployStudio in the 2010 one, about 54 slides, and they talk about all sorts of things. That was the first year of the conference. Any questions on deployment, or even the stuff to add like we just had? Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
So multicast is where it's like I'm broadcasting the traffic and everyone's picking it up, so I'm not sending individual packets to every station, right?
Correct. It's like playing a tape loop.
Right, so how long does it take you to image a machine at 100 megabits then?
Too long.
But, I mean...
Well, no, literally, it was a 10 gig image, and it was going, when I tried it with just 3 or 4 stations.
No, but if you're doing one station, how long does it take? Because you could theoretically, with multicast, if you get it working right, theoretically you could do it in the same amount of time because they would all be listening at the same time, so you wouldn't...
I think the answer is behind you.
Well, I have a 100 megabit connection in my environment, and my line image is about 6 gigabytes. That goes out in like 8 minutes. Snow Leopard's a bit bigger. It takes like double the time, 16 minutes. So that should give you an idea roughly of how long it should take. That's just one machine. It doubles if you try to add another machine doing unicast. But if you're just doing one, it should be pretty quick. 8 minutes.
Yeah, and just because we're being recorded, I'm just going to repeat that he suggested that it would take about 8 minutes to do about a 6 gigabyte image. So the recording gods are happy now. Last section, user management. How do you guys prevent users from doing stuff you don't want them to do? How many of you use parental controls? Okay, that's because around where I'm at, that's common. They just build that into the golden image, and that's the way they do it. Any of you using directories or MCX on the server to manage stuff? Like you're using a server to say, okay, they can only do this type of stuff. Are any of you using local manage MCX, local MCX? Okay, because local MCX is what I use. Of course, user management lets you, here are the ways you can manage users, right? You can just remove the software. You can just say, I don't want them to run it, so I'm just not going to include it. That gets difficult for stuff like mail, where the next OS update is going to push out, oh, there's an update to mail, and there's going to be a shell of something that looks like mail, and you're going to get more tech call, you're going to get more problems dealing with that than it's worth. So those are the ones that are hard to remove. The good old looking over their shoulder. You might be able to use that in some environments. I put it up there for completeness. There are commercial tools, something like deep freeze or stuff that say, okay, you cannot go in these zones. Did any of you support OS 9 machines or classic OS machines? Remember Foolproof? Yeah, that's an example of a commercial tool that does that type of stuff. And then parental controls, but that only works with image creation 1.0 type methods if you buy my methodology. So the final one is managed client, or the final two are managed client for OS 10, which we've been calling MCX through the whole time. And if you saw, I've already seen a couple sessions today already talking about the ability to enforce things once, often, or always. Workgroup Manager does it for 10.5 to 10.7. Everything I'm hearing here today, just being at the conference, suggests that this is going to go away. But I also know that the chances of me being able to deploy Mountain Lion in time for September is pretty low. Profile Manager works in 10.7. We don't manage that way because in my small lab, but I did have a chance to play with that doing the Lion 201 server training, and I must say it's pretty slick. It's clearly the way Apple is going. I have no idea what 10.8 is going to do and what the solution will be, but one of the things that if you log into our machine with that restricted user account, this is what they see when they go to system preferences. Again, it's a little washed out, but you'll notice that there are a bunch of things locked down in system preferences that with parental controls, you cannot lock down. So I'm glad to see that no one else is doing it, because that clearly isn't enough. There are people that do use it. So many of you use Workgroup Manager. You know that it can do that simply by, and if you haven't seen the interface, going to Workgroup Manager, downloading, running it, and authenticating to the directory. In my case, because I'm using local MCX, I authenticate to the local directory. Just after you launch it up, Command-D to connect to it. Select the user, and then I can select whatever things I want to manage. So for example, with system preferences, I just say, yes, Bluetooth, that, no, not date and time, and then just apply it. So just in general MCX settings, and again, I apologize for just being thorough here. For those of you who already know this stuff, you can apply it to users, groups, devices, or device groups. I'm using that terminology. In 10.6 and earlier, they called it computers and computer groups. But since we're getting into Profile Manager land where you can manage iOS devices using a Lion server, that's the terminology we'll use moving forward. And it does require that you authenticate to an OS 10 server running OD, and it can be, doesn't?
Nope. We use no OS X servers in our environment.
No, but okay, I'm talking about MCX in general, not local MCX.
Okay, gotcha, sorry.
Thanks for the clarification. Here's the god of local MCX, Greg Neagle. Everything I've ever learned is from what he started. Wrote a book, Enterprise Mac Managed Preferences, with another author. Having said that, so if you have Safari books online, your university or your institution subscribes to it, you can just read it online. If you don't, Greg has put plenty of articles on the net. It's just that, and they're freely available. That one just happens to be the most thorough. And that it covers up to snow leopard. It doesn't have lion in mind, but most of it is still the same for lion. It uses the same underlying management system as the server method. You can still use Workgroup Manager to set up the same. As I showed you, I authenticated to the local directory instead. And all I do is I take a single file from the operating system, package it, and after my student technicians or myself have touched the machine in all the ways that they need to do, I have them log out of that user account, push that one package while the login screen is up to that machine, and as soon as we log that user back in, it's now managed. So, if you read Greg Niegel's stuff, he talks about doing it by computer groups. I fully agree this is the most robust way to do it. Having said that, I have a very specific set. I don't have to be that complicated. I don't have to put the MAC addresses in for all the machines I'm going to manage. Because I know on every single machine, there will be 2 users. And if there's more, I've added them. I know, I don't have to have any flexibility. So I can avoid a lot of that geekery and just capture one specific file and manage the direct user. So those of you who have used local MCX, that's where I differ from Niegel's approach, because I don't need that level of complexity. So in the handout, there's a whole to-do. So if you want to capture that, I literally say, OK, you go into Workgroup Manager, do this, apply, and then run like Composer and eliminate the private var DB exception. I actually take you through that. So if this sounds like something you want to do on a local station, you want to try local MCX, I've given you a whole list of how-tos, in fact, including what for most of you would probably be trivial, but I wanted to be thorough anyway, how you capture that particular file and where it is using a package capture tool like Composer, where you simply just make sure you touch, run it, touch the file, say now capture what changed, and then just have that file in there. Any of you run any of those apps? Do you even know what they are? Yay! Which one do you run? No. So Finale, Peak audio editing software, Isadora for interactive, actually written for dance mostly, but used in other applications, and Max, which is kind of the equivalent that music people use for interactivity and all sorts of stuff where they're interacting. All these things have one thing in common. They use copy protection. Now, I'm going to tell you about one additional tool that I have that, because I have all these apps, and otherwise I would have to touch every single machine. There is a company that offers a product that these companies can opt into that manages copy protection from the server. And that is, well, I'll call it KeyServer, because that's its original name, but it has a key auditor portion. So the company, Sassafras Software, calls it K2. All those apps that I showed support KeyServer. Sometimes you have to ask, because they don't advertise on their website. But very beneficial for me, because on all 4 of those apps, I don't have to touch the machine anymore. Basically, the company just, in some cases, they send me a text file, a license file. I throw it on the server with KeyServer, and it manages. It says, OK, you got 30 licenses for this product, or here are the restrictions, right? And so it does that, and all that happens is when you boot up those apps, it checks in with the server and says, hey, with Finale, they don't actually even require the license file. You just have to, it supports it out of the box. They are actually, if you're doing a volume license, they're trusting that you are managing the correct number of licenses.
I'm using Finale license.
Oh, OK. Yeah, then that's fine. That works for you. This is if I didn't have to install that extra license server because I already have this that works with other things. So yeah, but it works in basically the same way. Some of the additional things that are useful for this, it can manage non-Mac clients, Mac, Linux clients, Solaris clients. They may even use to, they have a legacy one for Novell NetWare actually. They've been around that long. You do need to administer it from a Mac or Windows machine, but it certainly doesn't have to be the server. There's definitely an upfront cost with this. It's about $25 to $29 a seat in a small lab volume. Gets cheaper as you go up, and if you have to add seats, you just pay the difference. And then the way they do it is they say maintenance fee of 18% per year if you want to stay current. And so for our lab, between the two labs plus a couple other machines, 40 seats, it's costing me like $187 a year. Once I made the initial investment, to do that, so I don't have to touch those machines for those 4 apps, actually a couple, yeah, those are the 4 main ones. That was totally worth my money. That totally saved my money. Here's an example of the policy screen, and you can't really see it, but let me just say, it just says, okay, I created this policy. I said for Photoshop, I have 21 licenses. I want them to be able to run concurrently. I got 21. I typed in the number. If an app is idle, what do? Do you shut it down automatically? Do you wait until the licenses are up? Do you wait till a certain percentage of the license is up? Do you warn the user? You can configure all those type of things. And if you've told it to control it, so in the case of Photoshop, it will actually, I've got it saying, warn, but if there are 2 people waiting in the queue, it'll queue users. If you have shared stuff, I said, go ahead. Quit anyone that's just idle, not actually doing anything. So that's a powerful thing between this. I've also, you remember that case I said, how do I control like mail? Because deleting it's not really a good option. This is how I control it. I just say anyone launching mail other than my machine or the student tech machine, don't let them run it. Just put up a dialog box saying this. So I just say lock it to these nodes. Here's 4 of them. I could have less. And then I set up a group of policy stuff. And so you can also manage in groups, which is really nice. So all those things, I just tell KeyServer to block. And so this is a really good way that if you're not using authentication, this may be a way to enforce policy that is a little more cost effective than potentially doing like a server or getting people authenticated. I used it because I came for the copy protection. I stayed for the user management, right? It's a side benefit. It does do something like Apple Remote Desktop does, kind of a little bit more. It does generate reports like, here's the number of users we had using Microsoft Office over the past year, charted by month. Here are all the attempts that I had for overage. So that first one is a good way to say, are there ways I can save on software? I'm not using all my licenses. This is more, do I need more licenses? Or, like for example, mail. Over the past year, blocked 213 times. So there are obviously apps that we're using that have hooks into the OS that say, go use mail. Well, maybe I should look at that. But for now, at least it's locked down. We're not having any user questions about it. So I get nice side benefits out of that. So you might want to consider it. Again, the slides, there's a couple of slides in last year's presentations about local MCX. If you want to investigate it, for a situation where you don't authenticate to a server, it's a really good method. Sounds like you're having success with that?
Well, we actually authenticate every user to Active Directory.
Oh, really?
And then, but we use local MCX to control the Macs.
Okay, you can, like I control access basically be a card to get into the room. You control it by, they authenticate to the machine, and then we just don't let them be nasty, which was something actually I could do in my situation if I had a more open lab. I could certainly do that. That makes sense. So, you know what I did? I clicked on the link. I just went to tap it, pull out of my keynote. Sorry, I'll be back in a sec. Having said that, that's my time and that's it. So do you have any, so that's local MCX. Do you have any questions about local MCX? Okay, so There we go. I should just swipe. So that's it in a nutshell. Those are the things I do. I hope you took at least a couple things that were useful to you. If you want, I'll hang around for a few minutes, answer questions. I'm here all week, and since I'm not traveling with anyone, if you have any other things you want to talk to me about, come to me at lunch, wherever you see. I'll be happy to. I'll be happy to talk to you. Any last minute questions? Yeah.
Do you have any issues with storage space since they're all the users are just sharing the internal hard drive over the workstation?
So 5 years ago, I would have said yes. Now, storage sizes are big enough that the people who are real pigs know that they have to have an external hard drive. And in fact, if they're doing video, we say, yes, by all means, work on our machines, but this is a public space. Someone could accidentally or maliciously delete your files. You better, storage is cheap. I mean, everyone in here who has got gray hair knows storage is cheap,
So do you have like a cleanup script or something when people log off so nothing stays saved?
Nope. Everything persists.
So everybody's stuff is all in one big lump.
Yep.
So people can go in and mess with other people's stuff.
Yep.
Does everybody back their own stuff up?
So essentially the answer is yes. We use our file server. We tell them, if you have a class in the lab, we have designated folders. Again, it's a public space. They don't authenticate. Well, I mean, we do authenticate under the hood using that little script, but it's a public user space. They just copy it up. And we can, our server now, we say, probably no more than 20 gigs, but you can copy up there. But we still say, if you're doing lots of work, you should have your own USB sticks. We've got little things mounted, USB FireWire right up front. I'll take any other questions after you're gone, but I know no one wants to miss the party, maybe get a rule. So thanks, everyone. Slides are there if you want them.